This episode of the ChatGTM podcast is brought to you by Budget Branders, your source for custom branded cups and bags. So what makes them unique? Well, they source using a hybrid supply model, they import to keep prices low, and they have domestic backup to fill in the gaps. Learn more at budgetbranders.com or connect with Budget Branders on LinkedIn. And now it's time for the show. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon, good day, good night, wherever the heck you might be. It's Michael Beck and the ChatGTM podcast coming to you live from Tampa, Florida, Boston, Massachusetts, and somewhere where our guest might happen to be. We'll find out a little bit later. But for now, let's kick off a little banner. What's going on with my partner in crime, Mr. Chad Horn, dude with the awesome background? What's going on in your world today?
It's one of those Friday recordings, which I
Friday.
appreciate. Things are a little more chill. Looking forward to the weekend, and we especially if it's somebody we know well, like our guest today. It's going to be a more fun
Yeah.
conversation.
And so is this weekend Father's Day also, Chad?
Yes, as I was recently reminded. Yeah.
Well, you know what? The damnable thing is you're not supposed to do stuff for Father's Day. They're supposed to do stuff for you.
Well, yes. That is how it's supposed to work. But no matter what, I got a lot of work I got to do around the house this week. But I'm hoping for some pleasant
All right,
surprises.
I'm not getting into that right now.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah, you need way pleasant surprise, like no work around the house this weekend. It's your freaking day. You got 4 kids.
Yeah, we're getting ready for some
They
things.
should all be running around with Swifters on their feet, like skating through the house with Swifters. I think that should be the thing at the Horn household.
If I score 2 hours of bliss, I am happy.
All right. Well, I will hope you get bliss. Well, for now, let's pivot to what we're here for today on this Friday, on this Juneteenth. Chad, who's our guest today?
Our guest today is best-selling author Jason Riggs, and Chief Product Officer, among other things, at Audivi AI. For listeners of our podcast, he will be a familiar face.
Yeah, so we're starting to get the point in the journey where we're starting to have our SNL guests like Steve Martin that are reappearing features. Jason's definitely one of those. Love the fact that he not only is making product, but he's writing about it and kind of his philosophy on technology and how he looks at things like AI. And this should be a really engaging conversation. And I always feel weird that we don't have a green room. They have to listen to us say this about them in front of us. And maybe the facial reactions are good or bad. I don't know. Okay. Well, let's do the read in. We'll actually get to work here and invite Jason onto the stage. So, everybody, today's guest, as you might have guessed, is Mr. Jason Riggs. Jason is an AI product executive and chief commercial and chief product officer at Audivi AI, where his team is focused on building a world-class drive-through voice solution that not only delivers, but does so at affordable and predictable costs. So Jason spent more than 25 years leading product and technology teams at companies like GoPro, Qualcomm, and PAR Technology, operating across consumer tech, enterprise software, and AI. And he's also the author, and I love this because I read the book, of Mach 10 PM, an award-winning book on AI-powered product management and high-velocity operating models. And so now Jason's back with a new book, The Mach 10 Leader, where he explores what leadership looks like in a world where execution speed is accelerating faster than most organizations can handle. And his core philosophy is speed with soul, argues that as AI increases velocity, human judgment becomes more important, not less. Critical thinking, everybody. So Jason, welcome to the stage. How you doing?
Wow, I'm doing great. Thanks for the intro. And man, Michael, you nailed it. It's almost like you had it scripted in front of you. It was so perfect.
You know, you never know, except when I caught myself and started reading back again. But yeah, you know what? I'm starting to figure out that reading like that is actually a skill too. So I got to keep sharpening my pencil.
Yeah, no, that was great. And
Yeah.
thanks again for having me on. And apologies to your listeners if I've hit my quota of appearances on the show, but I'll do my best to make it entertaining.
I think you do. I don't think you're gonna have to apologize when you're done with what you're about to do here. So, well, I'm going to take the swing at the first question because that's just how greedy I am here. But let's talk about your book, right? The Mach 10 Leader. I mean, you've been talking about Mach 10 speed for product teams. What breaks first when leadership tries to operate at that velocity?
So it's interesting. The first book I wrote, the Mach 10 PM, it talks about how you can move more quickly, especially if you're leveraging AI as, as an orchestrator of intelligence rather than, some kind of bolt-on tool, right? So that was kind of that half of it. This is really the other half of that story, because if you've got someone operating within an organization very quickly, but then the leadership and the decision making are still kind of at the legacy speed, where there's a lot of deliberation and alignment meetings and all that kind of stuff, then basically fast processes can break inside a slow system. I mean, it's that simple, right? So if you don't have your decision making tuned up to essentially meet the velocity of your actual product motion and the flow that's happening there, then the whole process just really doesn't work. So this is kind of the other side of it now, saying, okay, now that we have this ability to create things more quickly, to move more quickly, now that we've got all this technology that makes execution much more, I guess, easy, if you will, then we need to figure out how to make that decision making process happen more quickly, rather than going through all the deliberations and endless alignment meetings and refinement of PowerPoint decks and all that kind of stuff.
When you're talking about that, I visually see me, my ADHD brain, having a conversation with somebody who's a little more thoughtful and deliberate, and like just the let's get like that's the AI speed culture,
Hmm.
and then talking to leadership, they're just trying to take it in and figure out what's going on. It is an interesting conundrum.
Yeah.
Chad?
Um, so when we talked before, you had written another book, but I mean, I don't know. Did you write that first book while you were at Adivi, or was that before? Because now my real question is this: what principles of your book did you have to apply to be able to write another book while leading a fast-growing startup?
Well, it's just not sleeping much, to be honest with you. I think I get maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, which is not healthy, by the way, not recommended
No.
for a normal human. But yeah, really, it was just one of those things where, the first idea came to me because I was living it, having done product management for so long. And I just realized, especially now being in the role I'm at Audible, that if you don't have the other piece of it tuned up, you just run into a lot of the same, sort of issues that you had with bottlenecks and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it was really just, again, working late nights and early mornings, and trying to essentially use whatever tools I could to optimize the process. The other piece, by the way, and this is a big one, is that having gone through the indie publishing thing once, where you're half the craft is just learning the tools and like, how
Right.
do I use this? How do I do Google ads? Like all that stuff. I didn't know any of that. And this time I could actually just focus on the content. So in all reality, I think it's a better book. I think it's a more consistent book. And it came more easily because I knew how to use everything. So that piece of the learning curve at least was not an issue this time.
You know what, Chad? It's funny. We heard the same language 2 days ago when we had Sterling Douglas on, and we were
Thank you.
talking
Thank
about
you.
where the bottleneck has moved. Right? I'm gonna ask the same question you asked to
Yeah.
Sterling, right? So when you're looking at that and the way the AI is coming, we're gonna bounce from your book and your philosophy here. Where's the bottleneck move now that AI has come into play? Because it was in one place, but now it's definitely in another.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. It's decision latency, because everyone, I think, a lot of especially leadership groups at these organizations, they want to incorporate AI. They want to move more quickly. They want to be more agile. But looking back at sort of how they do things, with quarterly board meetings and alignment meetings and making sure everyone's on board before decisions get approved, I guess, if you will, right? Like, I don't know if you guys have been through the hiring process at a big corporation, but it feels like it's hiring by like 1,000 people, right? Like everyone's got to
Yes.
talk to the person, everyone's got to get aligned and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like there's a lot of processes that kind of fall into that. And the thing, especially at Audible, that I really value, and one of the reasons why, I think that we're making such good progress so quickly, is a startup has that ability to be agile, because the bureaucracy at the top end just isn't there, for the most part, right? So you have the ability to move more quickly. Having said that, those decisions that you make have to be better. They have to be more accurate. But
Mhm.
you don't always have to necessarily wait for all of the data to come in to make those decisions, because you can iterate, you can learn, you can get behavioral information that will help inform what you do next. So I think moving quickly, but also moving deliberately and intentionally, is so important in the new organizations where, again, with AI, I mean, you could build just about anything very quickly. That's not to say it's cheap, that's not to cheapen the whole development process, but the output and the thing that used to take forever now is very quick. So now you have to make sure that the bottleneck, if you will, which is really like, should we do this? And how are we going to fund this? And has the CFO signed off on this? Like, all those processes have to be, essentially, the velocity has to increase on all those. Otherwise, they just become the stopping point for a fast process that follows beneath them.
Mhm.
And that's really where I think, organizations haven't really gone through that level of metamorphosis for the most part. So, That's what I'm hearing anyway when I talk to folks. There's like, hey, I'm moving quickly. I don't think my organization is necessarily moving as quickly, so I'm kind of in the same spot I was when I started. And it makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense. Things have to be funded, considered, deliberated. I don't know, whatever whatever words you want to use. The
Right.
whole and that's what this book addresses. Like, how can you expedite that process so that you actually can literally move more quickly, not just think you're moving more quickly.
Mm,
That's right.
mm.
So, Jason,
Mhm.
for like, I want to get to the headlines of this, but I want to do it by contrast with what we've heard is kind of the life of one of the people who isn't the leader necessarily, but the executor. I'm imagining the person that has 5, 6, 7 quad windows going at once, going each working on their thing, and they're switching between them. It's like, what do I need to update? Click yes, reprompt, etc. And
Mhm.
they're going to reach the limit of what their brain can handle.
Yeah.
But they're doing it, right? What does that look like for someone leaning in that hard as a leader trying to expand the quality and quantity of their leadership decisions, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And now, by the way, there's remote Claude, which means you can do it like, in the sauna if you want, right? So it's like
Oh
it
God.
follows you everywhere. That was a weird example, but you get the idea.
Well, you know what he does in the sauna now, everybody. Live with that visual. No, just kidding.
But yes, you getting back to your question. So, and I think you bring up a good point. Like capacity and velocity, especially at Oddity, it's faster than it's ever been. Like people can really accomplish tasks almost to the point where you have a hard time defining and shaping the work quickly enough to give them the right level of guidance for what they actually need to get done. So again, I think there is a level of human judgment that has to be applied. It's not necessarily just like have this thing crank out everything as quickly as humanly or not humanly, as quickly as non-humanly possible. It's more like let me do the reality check on what actually came out and make sure that it makes sense, that there's not hallucinating, that the call outs are correct, that things don't need to be challenged. But again, you can expedite that process because you have sort of the initial foundation to work from, right? Like you're not working with a blank sheet. If it's code, if it's requirements, whatever it is, you got something to start with. It's much easier to go back and refine that than it is to really just build it from the ground up.
Mm,
But I do think there is a level of burnout actually that's
yeah.
associated with how much you can crank out and so quickly. And it's just really important, I think, that anyone who's in that environment keeps the human judgment in place because one of the things I talk about in the book actually is the Godzilla effect. And no, I don't have that trademarked. I couldn't get Godzilla, unfortunately. But I will tell you this, that effect is basically where you have a tiny issue that no one catches and it propagates through the system. And then you build on top of it over and over again until eventually it becomes this essentially monster that's been fed by
Mm,
AI because no one took the time to reality check it early on. And that's a real thing. Like that can happen. Things can propagate, errors can propagate throughout a system now in a ways they never could before if we don't continue to apply human judgment and make sure that we're keeping things in check in the early stages. So, to your point, Chad, like that's so important because you have so many inputs and you have so many outputs that actually putting that human judgment layer on top of it is so critical. Doesn't have to be the old version of it, but it has to exist from a critical thinking perspective.
mm. You know, that opens the door to part of what you're right about too, the idea of speed with soul. I think it's super strong, right? So where do you see companies losing that soul as they push an AI? And what's one leadership habit that simply can't survive like just, the Mach 10 environment? And funny, when you say Mach 10, yeah, I'm extremely visual. I'm thinking about a plane breaking the sound barrier and
Mhm.
there's a delta wave that
Mhm.
causes that sonic boom. And it feels like we're at the sonic boom moment
Mhm.
or things go faster, but potentially something's gonna break or it gets really loud and noisy in the process.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So it creates an environment where you have to trust the people that aren't you to actually make the right decision. So you have to make sure the people that are in the organization that can actually execute quickly also have
Mhm.
the right level of critical thinking and information to make decisions along the way. Because if everything has to go through an alignment exercise or several meetings to discuss, I mean, granted, there is an importance to strategy and planning and all that. I'm not undercutting that at all. I'm just saying some people think if they have 10 alignment meetings that they're making progress when the market's already passed them by because they made a decision on something that, maybe with incomplete information. So I think it just comes down to, when you talk about what's not going to survive in today's sort of corporate world, it's this notion that you can take as much time as you need to really, I guess, vet out the problem, vet out the solution, make sure that everything you're doing is on point because everything has a risk associated with it. The problem is the risk now is not execution; it's moving too slowly because everyone else can move more quickly. So again, it's important that you make the right decisions. Probably more important than ever because things do move so quickly. But those old processes, those old sort of you know, just thinking things through over and over again and execution taking forever and you have time to do like this slow process. That's one of those things I think that just won't survive because the market can literally pass you by while you're getting aligned.
Mm,
And so that kind of damage is hard to come back from. Whereas, if you think about agile development, the whole concept of agile was building an MVP and then iterating on it and learning from the market and sort of figuring out what you needed to really build along the way versus over engineering the V1. And this is kind of taking that concept and accelerating it. Like you take the best decision, the best information you have, you execute on it, and then you iterate on it based on the feedback you get. You can just do it at a much faster clip than when Agile first came out, whatever it was, 20 years ago.
mm, mm. Chad?
So, what is this gonna look like, or does it look like now for people on the outside of a company looking at the observable signals that let's give them credit. Let's say their product teams are moving quickly,
Mhm.
right? And on executing fast with AI, but their leadership isn't. What does that look like from the outside?
From the outside, it just looks like an organization that's not optimized, that's falling behind.
Yeah.
To be as simple as I can, I mean, it looks like the same slow-moving organization. There's just an undercurrent of fast process happening beneath it that essentially hits a brick wall. And that's really the challenge. Is again, everyone wants to move more quickly, but and I think, all of us want to move more quickly. The question is, you don't want to move more quickly without a clear plan. Like, you don't want to just increase the level of chaos. So you have to have alignment at the leadership level to also move more quickly. And if you don't, then again, from the outside, it just looks like, well, I don't see any changes really because they're still moving at the same velocity they were before they implemented any of the stuff on the actual, builder side,
Hmm.
because the leadership side hasn't caught up. And that to me is the big risk right now. The bottleneck is leadership and decision making. And it's hard, right? Because middle management and management, they've all kind of gotten into this mindset that like you have as much time as you need to sort of figure things out. And even though you want to move quickly, the execution is going to take a long time, so you can change things along the way. And that paradigm is gone. I mean, that whole thing is done, and it's because of AI. Now, having said that, again, human judgment is so important, and making sure that what you're actually building is so critical. But at the same time, you can't take as long as you used to do that. And there's tools to help you facilitate this process as well, right? I talk about some of those. I mean, you mentioned Claude. I mean, there's all kinds of the world's information you can get in moments if you want to do like a competitive
Yes.
analysis or even a should we or shouldn't we or how much is this going to cost us? Like all that stuff can be done so quickly now. You don't need the time you used to need.
I think you set it up perfectly for transition to talking about, we're talking inside the companies and how speed affects those things. Let's talk about the brands, right? And specifically that place where you work today
Uh-huh.
and support in the drive-through, right? Because that is every restaurant say that speed is king. You have to get throughput, 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 right? And it turns out that if we look at it at the drive-through, that's where a lot of your best people are getting stationed,
Mhm.
right? Why do you think that's why are they putting them there? And more importantly, what's the hidden cost that the operators aren't seeing when they do that? Is it churn? Is it is employee satisfaction dropping? What's the problem that introduces?
It's a multi-tentacled problem, I guess. There's so many things that happen. So one of them is the turnover, like you said. I mean, you're putting your best people there because they have to be fluent, they have to be personable, they have to be able to upsell, they have to be able to capture the order accurately. So you really have a bunch of different factors that ultimately lead to burnout. I mean, I think the QSR turnover rate right now is something like 130% annually, which means that,
If
a
you're
lot.
being kind,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, I know, which means a lot of QSRs, are turning over their entire staff more than once a year,
Mm.
which is crazy, right? Like that's not sustainable for most businesses, and it's expensive. Even if you're hiring, people at that level, like that's an expensive problem. I mean, they say it costs somewhere between $1,000, $5,000 to replace one of those people, depending if you count the training and the level of the person and all that. But again, your best person is probably the one taking the order. It might be a manager. It might be someone that you value more. And it's a really stressful job. I mean, it's a job that is so important and so critical, but nobody, I think, really would say that they enjoy the stress of managing the drive-through part of order taking. And so, that is absolutely a real cost. I think also you start getting with burnout and with even just fatigue, you start getting order inaccuracies. People stop upselling, they stop, sort of doing the company greeting, whatever it is, right? So there are soft costs associated and hard costs associated with having those people at the, taking the orders at the drive-through. And quite honestly, it's not even really necessary in this day and age because we have such good technology that can capture the order and those people can focus on the things that they do best, which is being personable and making sure the right items make it into the order and, all that kind of stuff, quality control, everything. That's where those people I think really could add more value rather than doing something that I think, a product like Autovie can handle very well today.
Mm.
Beautiful. Chad?
Um, so we heard in the news, saw, read like everybody did that McDonald's, who had previously withdrawn from drive-through AI, kind of get back in the game. I'm just curious, since you're living this, what is the current state of drive-through AI in the industry? State of implementations, etc.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories about, one QSR or another who tried something and it didn't work. And you're probably going back, maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. And a lot of the Gen 1 products were they had humans in the loop. But quite honestly, the AI wasn't even quite as sophisticated as it is now. Like the models have gotten so much better, even in the last few years, that you had, I think, a lot of just inaccurate order capture. You had hallucinations. You had conversational issues where, the AI couldn't interpret necessarily what was being said at the speaker post. So, again, fast forward to today, and I think the models have gotten better. I think the technology has gotten more sophisticated in terms of how people handle noise reduction and all that kind of stuff. Even some of the drive-through products themselves, like HME and some of the others, they have noise cancellation that's gotten better over that time. So I think the end-to-end experience is just much more set up for success, if that makes sense, based on the technology that exists today.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing more and more people, seeing that with the Gen 2 solutions, because they're actually experiencing, okay, that actually does work. It actually does understand. If I order something off menu, if I try and order 10,000 waters, it actually is going to stop me now. All those things that were easy to break back in the day, I think are becoming less common now. And the order accuracy, at least for some of the products out there, has increased. And by the way, on top of all that, at least with our product, the cost has gone down quite a bit, not because the tokens have gotten cheaper, because everyone knows AI has a cost to it, but it's because of the way they're handled and some of the stuff that we've done from a proprietary standpoint to make it cost effective for the customer.
Wow, I really kinda wanna jump ahead to cost effective
Um,
because he just brought it up, so I'm gonna pounce on that one.
yeah.
Uh, I think this is probably one of the most compelling arguments you guys have, knowing how well your technology works. Let's talk about that number. What is it, 475 a
Yep.
rooftop? Is that right? Yeah. So most operators assume that AI is expensive or out of reach, but how'd you get that price point? And so some people listen and go, "Well, that's a starting point, and there's going to be things that are layered on top of that afterwards, almost like a freemium model."
Uh-huh.
How do you get to that point and stay to that point and make that predictable, affordable cost real?
Yeah, and I'm gonna be, very candid. Like when we first got to that price point, I was like, maybe we should quadruple check that. I want to make sure. I want to make
Yeah.
sure, we're not gonna go out of business here. But no, it's legit, and there's
There's
a
literally a third of what the market's saying right now, I think.
yeah, that's right. And again, even, gosh, when I was looking at these things a couple of years ago, they were in the 1 to 2,000 or more range, depending on the company. So again, this goes back to a lot of them had humans in the loop, which is a very expensive resource that, again, at this point, you don't really need. So that's part of what the cost constraint was for some of these companies. Also, some of them started off as like phone order taking, and then they pivoted to actual drive-through order taking, which we all know is a very different beast. But the bottom line is Autovie is purpose built for POS integration, for AI order taking, QSR order taking, I should say. So it's been architected that way from day one. So we've got a lot of different ways that we handle those costs. We don't use as many tokens. We understand if there's a deterministic output, if we kind of know what someone's going to order, we have that, we have that queued up, if you will. So we do some caching and things like that in a way where it works, like we say, it's very effective, very accurate, but it's also one of those things where we don't always have to go back and constantly ping these models because let's be honest, that's a third party variable that you can't control.
Mm,
And the models don't get less expensive. What they do is they'll release a new one and then deprecate the old one. And so you kind of just have to keep paying the same or more. And, that's a cost you can't control. It's a third party variable. So the only thing you can control is how often you actually use it, how you package everything in such a way where you've got this thing that is affordable for owner operators, which again, that was a breakthrough for us when we got to that price point. And for us, it's one of those things where we've got a patent, or multiple patents. We have things that we put in place in terms of processes, that I think, quite frankly, make some of our competitors angry because they just say, "There's no way you could do that. I know what this stuff costs," and they're right. It does have a cost, but they're wrong because we actually can do it.
So Jason, one of your colleagues said a lot of what you're saying this way, which is if you want to lower the cost of an AI solution, don't use AI. And can you think of a pithier way to say that?
I mean, it is true. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, right? Like the here's the thing, the enabling technology, it's AI. Maybe there'll be something else in 10 years, who knows, right? But the bottom line is that's what it is today. And we know it has a cost associated with it, and we know there's ways to make that cost more or less affordable for owner operators. But it is true, it's kind of like if you think about it like fuel for a car, like the more fuel efficient your car is, the less fuel it actually burns, then the better economics you get out of it. And AI is very similar. Like you need to use it, but you don't need to use it necessarily like you're skinning an LLM, which is what some of these companies do. They just put a skin on top of an LLM, and you're always going to be at a certain cost structure because you can't change it. Which is why the proprietary piece is so important in terms of how you manage that. So, anyway, that's very well said. If you want to control the cost of AI, just don't use AI as much. Perfect.
Related follow up. So, I mean, I'm curious what you find the differentiating variables to be that matter to the brands you're talking to and serve. Cost obviously is one of them,
Mhm.
especially in franchise environments. What are the other differentiating variables that people care about right now?
Yeah, there's definitely some hard variables like order accuracy is critical. No one wants to go in and turn the thing on and off and have to correct it if it's making mistakes. So order accuracy is 100% critical. I think how long it takes to process the order is also critical. So if you have too
Yep.
much dialogue, it takes a long time. You're not getting the throughput that you want, and that's part of the reason why people put these things in place in the first place, is to get better throughput and better order accuracy. So those are I think, some of the hard variables, some of the hard economics. There are soft variables too, where we've actually had people say like, "Wow, you're so easy to work with." The way you kind of bring in a customer and the way you get the audio setup that you need and all that kind of stuff. The way we ingest menus. So there is definitely an overhead associated with some of that. It can be more or less difficult. But then there's also just I think the notion that um, you know every one of these brands obviously operates on narrow margins. We all know that. I think we've talked
Yep.
about that on every show I've been on with you
Yep.
guys. So
I
the
think we talk
bottom
about that on every show, every time, with everyone.
every week. I know. I hate stating the obvious, but sometimes you have to. But I think the bottom line is if you have, let's say you even said the 475 a month. We have had some prospects and customers tell us this, like, man, I'd put that in place just to have more or less insurance in case someone calls
Yeah.
out, right? I mean, 475 is pretty negligible even on a narrow margin business. And I think, from our perspective, it's not just that. It's not just an insurance policy, but it can actually increase throughput, increase upsells, like increase, margins on the business overall and increase tickets per customer. So there's a bunch of upside variables that come with it. But at that price point, again, the owner operators are like, man, I would just like if someone calls out and I have that available and I
Yeah.
use it a couple times a month, like that's worth it, is what some of them have said.
Mm. Going back to kind of your technical view of things, and you've been pretty vocal about direct integration. And so why does it matter so much whether AI is bolted on versus something that's natively integrated in the POS and kitchen systems? Does it mean anything?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it goes back to the order accuracy piece because if it's directly integrated, your chance of having mistakes, things that are misheard, things that don't make it into the POS correctly, they go down significantly, right? So having that direct POS integration is so critical, because let's be honest, like these drive-through environments, again, I'm gonna state the obvious. Some of them are just noise factories.
Right.
None of them sound like this podcast does right now, where you've got this clean
So
audio going
crispy.
back.
Yes.
um, and and when you add other variables to it, like a middle layer that then has to figure out sort of what's been said and then to carry that over, it's like the telephone game. Like the more layers you put in between, the greater your chances of failure because you have more potential points of failure along the way. So having that direct integration with the POS providers is so critical in making sure that the order makes it from the speaker post to the POS correctly. And by the way, things change, right? Like sometimes you run out of items, bacon or avocado or whatever it is, shakes, and you have to go and make that change quickly. And it's just so much easier to do with the direct integration because you're cutting out, I guess, the middleman, if you will, or the middle layer. So all those changes can happen directly and much more quickly and easily when you have that direct integration. And believe me, there's not a lot of POS integration engineers out there at this point. I think we have two of them on our team. We may have the last two in the world. I'm not sure, but they're valuable and they're smart and they've been around this industry a really long time and they're really really good at it, and that's so important, I think, again, for the end experience. Yeah.
So it'd be in follow up there, because we're talking about voice, AI, and cloud and compute. Is that also introducing, because of these stops, more a latency factor?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Again, every stop along the way is going to add some latency, some potential inaccuracy, but 100%. There's definitely a latency component to that. And believe me, we shave hundreds of seconds off every chance we can. We're kind of running out of hundreds of seconds, and at some point, the actual product is responding too quickly. It almost
Yeah.
sounds like we're cutting you off. So there is a finite amount of conversational optimization, I guess, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, there is a latency factor, and that's again another concern. Like when you pull up to a speaker post, and whether or not it's an AI order taking device or product on the other end, and you say something, you expect a response back in a certain amount of time. And if you don't get that response, you might go, "Hey, did you get that?" And then as you're saying that, then it'll respond back to you, and then the whole thing gets out of sync, and bad
Yes.
things can happen, right? So. The latency is so critical, and those pieces of middleware do introduce latency. Maybe it's even just a hundredth of a millisecond, or who knows what it is, right? I mean, it depends on the process and what's in there.
Right.
But it's just another, I think, another potentially failure point, if you will, for that whole process when someone pulls up to place their order. So I think that's a good
Mm,
call out.
mm. Chad?
So, what do you guys do? So, everybody's seen, and I just watched another one the other day. People, YouTubers, or whatever platform, going up to a drive-through, trying to mess with it. Putting those
Mhm.
people aside, the average human, they go through the drive-through. It's they're talking to an AI. What are people feeling now, right? Because, every month that goes by, AI, consumer sentiment changes. And so, where are people at right now with the AI experience at the drive through? What are some of the common reactions and feelings these days?
I think I think it's less like this uncanny valley of technology than maybe it was
Mhm.
even a few years ago. And people are so used to natural interfaces like your Google Home or your Amazon Echo. It's not technically called Alexa, but yeah. So people, I think, are always like interfacing with these things constantly now, and they're much more comfortable. Even Siri and all those other sort of natural interface devices. So I think that part of it, I think, is okay for people. A lot of times you can't even really tell, necessarily
Mhm.
that that's an AI or product on the other side. So I think there's that component of it. But then I think the part where I think people still maybe have a little bit of a distrust component, if you will, is they want to see the order displayed on the order confirmation, display to make sure it got the order correctly. Which, quite honestly, even if a human takes your order, you still want to see that, if you can, right? It's not always available, but if it is, you want to double check and make sure they held the onions or whatever it is, right? So I think people trust it to take the order, people trust it to capture the order, but order accuracy is still only 87% for humans. So I think that part of it, like they still don't think like this is going to somehow be more accurate than a human, or it's even a human could get it wrong, right? So I think that piece of it's still going to be a component at some point. I would hope that they actually just place their order, feel good about it. Maybe they check the display, but it's accurate and they don't have to overthink it, right? I mean, that's the whole promise of AI order taking is that it's so accurate and so fast and so, I guess, consistent that, you don't even think about like, gosh, that was an AI order taking, product that just took my order. You just place your order like you do interface with all these other devices that you use.
Yeah.
Mm. I keep coming back to the price point, and I have a feeling our listeners are as well. And I know you mentioned a little bit about that, but I'm sure you probably did some math on this or what's the calculus? So, when you change the cost structure like that, how does that shift the ROI math for a typical operator?
Significantly. I mean, when you think about let me get was that broad
Genius
enough?
moment. No,
Well, that's why I came to bring the insight, Michael, so you're
that's
welcome.
right. Yes.
Um,
Insight.
All right. So go ahead.
the morning zoo. Okay, so I will say, look, it's significant because, look, the bottom line is when these things are $1,000 or $2,000, and you think about what these owner operators pay for even like, POS and all the other tech that they have in their
Yeah.
establishment.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where, quite honestly, AI order taking was A, not as good as it is now, and B, was twice as expensive, at least as we offer it now.
Yeah.
And it just makes it so much less of a, like, I don't want to say no brainer because that sounds cliche, but honestly, if you can get AI order taking and it works really well, and you can, again, have it as either a backup or even a primary when you have people in the restaurant that can do other more human tasks, it really is like almost a slam dunk add-on, to be honest with you now. And I think before it was more of a decision you really had to think through,
Right.
hopefully quickly, but you had to think through it.
At a Mach 10 speed? No, sorry.
I didn't go there. But anyway, you get the idea. You had to think through it and you had to really do the math because the ROI was more challenging. I think now it's gotten to a point, again, not every product on the market, but at least when you get down to like 475, that price point is just like, I mean, what we're hearing is like, yeah, why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Chad?
I'm curious too on piloting process. Like, what do you have to do with one store, two store, three store before it makes sense to go? All right, let's go. I mean,
Yeah.
because each store is different, each team is different. Their customers, accents, all of that. How quick can you move safely?
Yeah, so we can get menus ingested and locations set up fairly quickly. There is a unique audio profile for almost every speaker and mic post, so we take that into consideration as well.
Hmm.
We want to make sure that whatever the profile is that we understand it and we optimize around it. 'Cause there's a bunch of different things you can do. I mean, obviously, again, HME has their technology. The different providers out there, Quail and so forth, they all have noise canceling technology. So then we have to figure out, A, what system they have in place, B, where some of the gaps may be based on the environment, and then see how we're going to mitigate that, right? But we can get, we start with 20 hours of audio. It's best if it's from different locations, even within a brand, right? Because you're going to have different environments, like you said. Gives us a good profile. And then we can get it going pretty quickly. And the bottom line is, once you get the pilot started, most people will typically do a lab test. That's not always the case, but most brands will. And then they'll do that lab test for some period of time, again, depending on how much lab testing they feel they need. And then after that, it's the pilot. Typically, it's like an hour or maybe two a day, to kind of try it out. And then they gradually increase that over time, over a short period of time, typically,
Mhm.
until the confidence is such that they can just essentially roll with it and go full blast with it. And again, I don't think at this point, I don't think most people are talking about like, hey, I'll just have this take all of my orders, every day. But like, especially during the rush periods or times when you have to process a lot of orders quickly, I think there's definitely a need for it there. But I think there are also times when, at least currently, a lot of brands think like, yeah, this is probably a better time to have humans take the orders. They have more time, whatever it is. I think at some point it will become the de facto order taking product, and humans probably won't have to, again, handle that burden like we talked about full circle
Mhm.
at the beginning of this. But it's one of those things where for now, I think it's at least viewed as something that, again, has a great value benefit to it. Accuracy is something that is so hard to come by. 87% accuracy is the last stat I read for humans. So even if you can improve on that by, let's say, 5 to 10%, that's significant at the end of the day in terms of margins. And then, it's one of those things where I think at some point it will be what you essentially interface with when you place an order at most QSRs. I honestly believe that. And it's not the too distant future either. It's going to be probably in the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, I think we're ready to dip into the rapid fire close out here. So we're going to start landing the plane. Jason, as a repeat guest, you might have done this one before. It's something we've layered in, which is just some fun, insightful human questions that you can answer that are relevant to the subject. And if they're not fast, you'd probably say pass, but relatively quickly. But you ready to get going?
Let's do it.
It's time for rapid fire with Jason.
Sorry, I had to do it. All right. Anyways, sorry for the mechanics, guys, but here we go. Jason, you're stranded on a desert island. You get one AI tool for the rest of your life. What are you picking?
At this point, Claude.
All right. What's the most overrated thing in AI right now?
The most overrated thing is that I think that everything that comes out of any AI model is accurate.
Ooh, yeah, yes, yeah, I agree. What's something humans are weirdly still better at than AI?
Judgment, no
Ooh.
question.
Critical thinking all day. If AI had a personality, what would annoy you most about it?
That it knows me so well.
What's a take you have that would start a fight at an AI conference?
That's a good one. That AI is not the future, but it is part of our future.
Okay. And so last two questions. What's one book, not yours, that changed how you think about building companies?
Oh, that's a good one. There's a handful of books that I've read that I think would fall into that category. I think one of the ones that I actually enjoy is really not even I know it's supposed to be a one-word answer, but anyway, it's a
We know this wasn't working, but go ahead.
the one that I think did have an impact on me early is a book called Deep Dive. It's basically strategic thinking, and it talks
Okay.
about how thinking at a strategic level, you have to really dive deeply to do that versus like the surface level thinking. And that really changed the way I looked at a lot of things, including, how you run a business.
Okay. And the last one, finish the sentence. The companies that win in the AI era will be the ones that blank.
That use the least AI.
Ooh.
Okay. I love it. I love it. I think this is great. And also, guys, if you heard this and you have questions about Jason's answers, you should reach out to him on LinkedIn and pressure test those assertions.
Yeah.
Jason, you have rapidly become the Steve Martin of the ChatGTM podcast. That's the cast member I would pick anyways. As ours a repeat guest, although he'd probably call himself Ryan Gosling. But but for now, we're going to go ahead and close out the session. But for the people that are really interested, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys? If you say, I'd love to try some of that 475A drive-through AI.
Yeah, I mean, you can either go to our website. We actually just redid our website. It's pretty easy to get in touch with us through the contact forms there and stuff, or you can just email me directly, jason@audivy.ai, or connect with me on LinkedIn or what have you, and we'll definitely interact and get back to you.
Fantastic. I know you guys have some shows coming up this year to be announced later, but I know you'll be on the circuit as well. But for now, let's go ahead and wrap it up. And for the ChatGTM crew, Chad and myself, we want to thank everybody for being part of our audience, letting us be part of your community. And you know what? I love that you guys stay tuned because we are out there bird dogging new stuff all the time and finding new ways to do things better, faster, and more effectively from a cost standpoint. And cost isn't about money. Cost is also time. If these things are a time suck for you, if you guys are investing in the wrong places, it's incalculable what it's going to do to your organization. So if we can help you in any way, shape, or form, make some better decisions by presenting these companies to you to say, hey, here's a view on it. That's our goal and our mission's been served. But for now, it's Chad and Beck and Jason signing off here with the ChatGTM podcast, wishing everybody a great Juneteenth and a happy Father's Day. And as always, random acts of kindness, sprinkle that stuff everywhere. You never know whose day you're going to make better, just like Jason made our day by being here as our Ryan Gosling, Steve Martin. For now, it's signing off the ChatGTM podcast. We'll see you guys on the next one. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.